course. Well, just before we begin, uh, just to bring in a sense of the land that you're living on as well. Um, I'm out in the Central Australian desert where it is, let me do it in Fahrenheit, 113 outside at the moment. That's my background. Dog energy. Oh, I'm sorry to hear about your beloved. That's a huge one. Marty, hello. And Hannah, Meadowlands. Mm, fabulous. So just a reminder to pop yourself on gallery view, just to get a sense of all the folks, all the folks coming in and joining us here. Hello from Nashville. Yeah, we've got folks from all around coming in. And we'll just begin in about a minute. There's a few other Australians coming in here as well. Great. Okay. People coming in everywhere. Oh my goodness. So let me just flick through the pages. Tracy, hello. Flick through the pages of everybody here just so I can get a sense of faces. Great. And I invite you just to get yourselves comfortable where you are. Okay. So let's begin. And Leah, if you're okay, just to keep admitting everybody, because I know I always pause and stop when I'm admitting people. It's like I kind of lose my words a little bit. Welcome, 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 welcome to this masterclass on animal brides, on animal wives, on animal women, animal beings, and that cross morphing between animal and human and fairy and other world. It's one of the rich things about fairy tales is they bring us into direct relationship with the fluid boundaries between realms, between species, and also between genders as well at times. I'm Jackie Bushell, and I'll be with you today. And I'm teaching here through the School of Sacred Storytelling. And a huge thank you to Leah Lamb for this opportunity to meet you all and to be able to bring in one of my absolute favorite topics around animism and fairy tales and what makes them still really relevant and important and powerful agents of transformation today. And I'll just mention as well, not just for personal transformation, you might be really familiar with Jungian perspectives with fairy tales, but transformation in the way of how we perceive and engage with our world and how we allow our world to engage with us. I see them as like, I guess, radical or revolutionary tools that enable us to be able to come into a greater communion or kinship with the earth, with spirit, with psyche, with soul, with all beings. So I'll just run through what we'll be doing today and then dive straight on in. An hour goes by very, very fast. So today we're going to be exploring a bit around the role of animal women. And I'll take you through a settling just for a couple of minutes, just to drop into the circle and the feel of what we're doing today. I'm going to go through a little bit of information coupled in and tied in with a few stories and a process to make it experiential for you so that it's not just information, but it's something that you can feel resonate through your own being and take it home. I love to make all my work as experiential as possible. And then for those of you who would be a little more interested in diving more deeply, there'll be about 5 minutes at the end where we'll talk about wolf song and what that brings in. And I'll have a brief mention about me as well and what I'm doing here. But first of all, let's just have a settle and come into this broad, wide, earth-wide circle here. So I invite you to allow your breath the full range of its expression, to allow your breath its curiosity to explore your body. Don't just breathe in like a bit of air coming in, but breathe in as an engagement, as an allowing of air to explore you, allowing yourself to receive breath. And if you breathe out, when you breathe out, I should say, breathe out with a sound, with a sigh on the exhale, a vibration of some sort, because it brings you into your body a bit more. So if you breathe in and breathe out with yeah. And if you have a stretch, and just roll your shoulders so you can feel your body, your animal body. Oh, just let yourself land here in this circle, in this space. And just as you stretch a little bit, just feel your skin as your pelt. It just changes something subtly to say pelt instead of skin. So just notice that sense of moving through your pelt and to come into your heart, because we don't just hear stories with our mind, but with our body, with our heart, and come also down into your belly, your deep-rooted, instinctual knowing space. So feel the ground underneath you and give thanks for the land that you live and love on. To your belly and feel the warm weight here in your heart. And just feel as well into your sense of the stories that you have heard over your life about animals, about fairies and creatures. And we'll come into the field of their embrace. And to give you a little bit of a sense of what I'm doing here, just being so in love with these stories and passionate about sharing them. And I guess one of the really big realizations that I had many, many years ago, have you ever had one of those realizations that seems so simple and so small that then goes on and kind of unpacks your entire life, that kind of changes your work, your perception, your sense of self, your sense of relating to everything? Well, many years ago, I had one of those. And I'd been working for many, many years as a herbalist. And I specialized in teaching people about local medicinal plants. I could identify anything in Australia. I knew my plants inside out. And I didn't realize at the time I had a strong sense of identity as my skills are myself. And I can kind of laugh about it now, but I didn't know that at the time until I went to America for 3 months into upper New York State, and I was meditating in a forest. And as I was walking around, I got edgy and idgity until I realized that it was because I didn't know the names of all of your plants over there. I didn't know the names of the trees, and that I was so used to walking around and going, okay, there's a particular type of eucalyptus, and this is what we use that resin for. This is a particular type of Biden's pilosa, and this is what we use it for. And I didn't know what I was looking at, and it threw me utterly. And what happened was I then realized I have to start learning all the names of the American plants. And this was before smartphones and before easy access to the net. So I had books and I was trying to remember all the names, and I was getting stressed. You know, how on earth could I be in the forest if I didn't know the names and what they were for? And then it dawned on me. That what I was doing was looking for what I knew, that I was seeing through the eyes of expectation and my personal knowledge, that what I was doing was looking for herbs so that I could identify their actions and indications and uses, and that I was seeing in such a small, small way. So what I started doing then was, well, one thing, I made up names for all the plants because I didn't know their botanical name. And I figured that plants probably don't really care what I call them, that they don't know binomial nomenclature in Latin either. And I started practicing seeing what was actually there and seeing what was present rather than what I knew. And it started changing me into a way of listening with instead of listening for. And then when I got back to Australia, that started changing a whole lot of ways of how I was listening and seeing everything, from people to relationships to responses. And what that then tied in with was all my work changed and my business changed to the name Sacred Presence, because I realized that presence and our senses and our animal self and how we listen and how we see is so darn crucial to our vision for the planet, for our communities, and how we're living. And I work with fairy tales as well as plant spirits, but I work with fairy tales a lot because they give us a framework, not just a narrative, but because they are made up of ancient stories that come from land, that come from the other world, that come from other energies. They give us a portal into knowing things in a different way. They give us a portal that is strong, that can enable us to connect with those energies, with those realms, and to listen more and more and more deeply. Among those fairy tales, there's a lot, actually, most of them have a lot of shifting and morphing between animals and humans. And like in the fairy tales, nobody blinks an eye. If an ant just says something to you and then does something miraculous, or, you know, if a bird comes in or says something to you or guides you, or if a gnome or a fairy comes in, it's just all very, very matter of fact. And I love that way that nature engages with us in the stories, and that when we allow those stories to touch us, it opens portals within us of being able to engage with and to connect. So they speak to, I guess they speak to a time as well when we had a closer relationship with nature, when we worked with totemic ancestors, that these animal wives and brides in fairy tales, they bring us into that kind of, I guess, wilder knowing in ourselves. And they also, one of the other things they do that's kind of subversive is that there's actually a lot more animal wives than animal grooms in fairy tales and in folklore. And they allow roles for women and also for the wild feminine, which is not necessarily related to only if you're a woman or a man. It's about finding and allowing that deep earth energy, that chthonic energy to move through your being. That this profusion of animal wives, whether they're frog princesses, swan maidens. Oh, the number of stories about swan maidens. Do you know that swan maiden stories go back to 30, 40,000 years ago, from drawings that are seen in Paleolithic caves? That the stories that are written down have an oral heritage that goes way back. Just pause for a moment to feel the story of the swan. The story of the snake woman has been told for so many thousands upon thousands of moon cycles. So many tongues have told that story, so that when we speak them, we're actually accessing something that is vast, something that has a great, huge heritage. So a lot of these stories, they allow for roles gender roles that step outside the normative values of a particular culture. And the stories have changed according to politics across the time as well. But the early ones allowed were more radical, were transgressive, were full of autonomy and agency and power for women. The early animal brides, and I'll just mention some of the other ones. There's seals, the Selkie stories of the North. The animals would change as well, depending on if it was coming from the East, they were frogs, the frog princesses of Russia and Armenia. They moved to snakes and to mermaids. When they went up into Northern Europe, then they turned into geese and into swans. When they went further west, they became seals. So they shift and changed and adapted to each land. So just have a feel as well into land that you live on now. If a swan maiden story came to you, it might not be as a swan, but what creature might it be if that story took root in your landscape? These stories morph and shift. So when you go outside today and maybe you'll tell a story of the selkie, but be open to what creature that it actually might be. It might be a different animal, and notice how that touches you or how the quality of the story changes. All of these tales were originally rooted in the land. So what happened over time as well is that these animal stories, these rich stories that originally came through from Paleolithic times, from serpent goddesses, from bird goddesses. Think of the Egyptian pantheon. Let me actually just share a screen. I've got some images for you. And share. Here we go. Let me bring these up. And so, the frog princess stories. It's bring in an incredible level of, so many of these animal stories bring in wisdom, bring in gifts of the land, bring in particular qualities of certain animals. The deer stories, deer women, wolf women, mouse women, cat women, fox stories, the kitsune, the Japanese fox women stories. They're quite amazing. Swan stories of women. Where they started was, and buffalo calf woman. If we go back to some of the early mythologies of beings that would morph to animal and back. This is a Holder Indian carving from the 19th century of a bear woman suckling a bear. She's part human, part bear. And if we go back to the Paleolithic paintings, there's often women, or these are sort of bee women as well, if you look at their heads, mixed in with bison, mixed in with, here we go, let me pause. Here we go, mixed in with horses as well. So this is a vast painting of an enormous horned woman. I just can't quite see. There we go. I'll just flick back. That clicked off there. So we have the Venus of Laurcelle, the link with the bison, the link with the moon. But what it's also related in with is that originally a lot of those goddesses are actually sun goddesses who mated in with the moon as a moon god. And then they moved on into swapping around, and more goddesses became moon-based a little bit later on. So this great bison, this extraordinary vulva is in the forest of Fontainebleau, and you can't quite see around it, but there's actually carvings of, I can't stop this, make it stop. Carvings of horses and bison. So the fertility and the abundance of snake goddesses, of bird goddesses. these ancient little carvings. So of the Lady of the Beasts, of women with the feet of griffins or of eagles, of winged beings, of snake goddesses. And there's so many stories as well of the relationship of snakes as ancestors, the Cretan goddesses you're probably familiar with, and other deities, Hathor, the great cow, Bridget as the great cow, goddesses as animals, Sekhmet, the lion goddess. Basically, a dragon is a flying snake. So snakes and birds often go together. That winged being, Isis is the vulture. So, this one down the bottom here is a scorpion goddess. We have cow goddesses, vulture goddesses, Isis. And I'll just pause the share there for the moment and come back. There we go. So these stories, these old animal stories, harked back to the times of deities and of the deities bringing plenty. They also came back to the time when we have a chat about Melusine very shortly, the time of the relationship with the fairy realm, when the veil between the worlds, between the other world, was very thin. All those very old Arthurian romances, the Grail stories, the stories of the Fisher King, was the story of the breaking of the relationship with the fairy realm, like with Melusine, the snake goddess, and that linking in with the deep underworld. That's why so many of those early fairies were also serpents or dragons. Think of the Pythia, who was the great dragon underneath the Sibyl's chair at Delphi. And then the great python or dragon that was slain by Apollo. Then we get into the stories of the Greek gods slaying all of those great dragons. But those stories, there's hints of them through these animal bride stories of snakes and of the relationship with the wild. For example, with the fox woman story of the Inuit. It's so relevant today because it highlights what we long for or what has been lost in the age of rationalism, where a hunter comes home one night and he finds this beautiful red-haired, green-eyed woman in there who's sassy as they come, who's cooking up a storm, and it's fantastic. But there's always a but with these stories. This is such a classic story, Foxwoman. There's a but. I'll stay here. I will be with you. We'll have a lovely time together as long as you respect my pelt. And the pelt hangs on the door here and everything's fine, 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 fine. And they're having a glorious time and laughing and loving. And then the pelt smell gets stronger, doesn't it? That's okay for a while. But then the pelt smell, it's through the food, it's through the man's clothes. He can't get away from the smell of fox. And it smells rancid and rank and he can't stand it. And he says, get that goddamn pelt out of here. Fox woman just looks at him. And in the next morning, he wakes up and the pelt is gone and Foxwoman is gone and she never returns. Broken. And he always longs. There is a grieving in him, always for the rest of his days, for Foxwoman. And it's the same thing for us in our grieving for that level of communion and union, to overcome that disconnect, to bridge between the veils. And the price of that says we must live with the smell of pelt. We must feel, like Mary Oliver says, our soft animal bodies and let them do what they must do. We must live in a way that is without the control that we so like, to step outside and smell and listen and to see what is there rather than what we expect, to listen with and not for. Just very, very, very briefly, some of the categories of animal stories, just while that story is settling and feeling into you. Animal brides. I know I'm talking a bit fast. There's so much I'd love to chat about here. Animal brides, there's about 4 different varieties of them. There's the one where the woman needs to get away, or she's on an initiation journey and she goes into the forest, the water, the desert, and she is changed into an animal. Alalurua, or donkey skin. She puts on the pelt of 1,000 skins and becomes animal, has an initiation, and then re-emerges. Think of Red Riding Hood, which we'll be exploring in Wolfsong, a radical Red Riding Hood. She goes into the forest and she merges and joins with Wolf. She comes out no longer a girl, but Wolf Maiden. The stories of let's see, where of the pelts, of where a woman can put a pelt on and off, of Selkie, the Swan Maidens. The pelt gets stolen. She gets coerced into being a bride, but she never forgets who she is. She always has the longing for her true nature. And then something happens and oh, okay. Leah, do you know how to turn on the closed captioning?
No, I don't, but transcripts can be
Okay.
made from the recording.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay. Actually, I should say I've got a 2013 computer here, so that's maybe why it doesn't work. Let's see. So there's the pelt being lost, and in those stories, either the husband transgresses again, he betrays her, he lies to her, he hits her, something happens, she finds her pelt and she's gone. And what is curious is that even though this notion of motherhood is sacrosanct in our culture, you never leave your children, these women leave their children, they follow a greater call and go where they have to go. They stay true to something, and yet there's also regret. I've left behind love, I've left behind children, and it teaches us about, bittersweet decisions that we have to make. So there's the women with the pelt. Then there's the older stories where the woman is the creature. There is no pelt to take on or off. She just morphs one to the other. These are like the ancient sovereignty goddesses of the Celts, of Maeve, of the Morrigan, who's boar, who is raven, Rhiannon, who is the horse, Epona, who is the horse. They are that in their true nature. Sometimes it's actually about shedding human skin, that they put human skin on and off to come in and to help support the land by taking a consort. Then there's also the ones where women are bespelled or ensorcelled, and then they've got to find somebody who can break the spell. And then their partner usually stuffs up in some way, and then they've got to learn how to break the spell in another way. So there's this marriage to a mysterious other than human being, the breaking of a prohibition or a taboo in some way, because a lot of these stories are also about telling, teaching about how to come into right relationship with land, with animals, for hunters, and any taboos, any law that might be known. I've got a friend who researches Black Madonnas and snakes and her Indian heritage. Her family are descended from the Nagas, from the snakes. And she says it's literal, not a figurative truth. We are descended from snake goddesses. In Ireland, I've got books from the late 1800s and the early 1900s. Oh, that family from up there in somewhere in the top of Ireland, they're descended, the O'Connors, they're descended from seals. You can always tell the children have slight webbing between the fingers and they have dark, dark eyes in which you can see the sea. Or it's matter in Scotland, seal people. It's matter of fact. That's where we come from. The story of Melusine. Oh, this glorious story of dragon woman, fairy woman, snake being, water nymph. The house of Lusignan, aristocrats in France, in the Poitou region, near the sort of sea centre area of France. They're descended from a fairy, from Melusine. And I'll mention this story briefly because then I'll characterize a few things and then let's just drop into a meditation. Why, oh, why did I make this a 1-hour masterclass? We could easily make it so much longer. So Melusine, well, these stories were written down in the 1300s, written down at the time of troubadours, of courtly love, of reverence for the sacred feminine form. You can imagine how these stories changed a little bit later on, just a century or so later. But it also ties into all of an oral tradition of women as snakes, of mermaids. Oh my goodness, there are so many mermaid stories around, and of water nymphs. So these early stories is that the King of Scotland married a fairy and had several children, but one of them was Melusine, half fairy, half human. What also happened for Melusine is beautiful. They were known as the fair ones or the shining ones, fair because they were so beautiful. And there was this otherworldly air around them. They kind of stood out, they glowed, they were radiant, they had gifts and attributes. And she was very much like those old sovereignty goddesses in the early stories. And Melusine was also part serpent or mermaid. Maybe mermaids are half snake as well. You know, there's a whole lot of sort of mixing around in there as well of what might be possible. So Melusine, apparently, I think this will be a later story, she turned into a serpent on, or half serpent, on Saturdays only. So I think that was a later edition. But so there was, what she did was she came over to France and she was found, discovered in a forest by Raymond, the Count of Toulouse, Count of Poitou. And he was of noble birth, very aristocratic, but absolutely impoverished. And Poitou was a land of marshes, not really worth anything much at all, had no power. He was hunting through the forest, all these classic fairy tale symbols. So he was hunting, came across a beautiful maiden beside a stunning fountain, and the water representing the other world and also representing the spring that goes down deep into the underworld, into the other world. So he sees this beautiful maiden. He's offered some water, the spring of life water, and he just falls instantly in love. She is just gorgeous and says, beautiful, what's your name? Melusine. I'm Melusine the fairy, the water nymph. And he says, marry me. I can love no other but you. And she said, yes, but on one condition that cannot be broken. I will marry you. We will have union, and I will bring riches beyond belief to this land and to your family. But you must never, ever watch me when I am at my bath. You must never, ever spy on me on Saturdays. Life went on. They had this incredible union. There was prosperity. There was wealth. The marshes got drained. Poitou became a power. They had 10 boys. Curiously, every boy had an animal attribute. One had tusks of a boar, one had hooves, you know, one had hair. Actually, just as an aside for a moment, did you know the Queen of Sheba had webbed feet and haired legs? There's all these stories about her as being part animal as well, and that merging in with the goddess Asherah, in with the Judaic line. Okay, back to Melusine. So she had these 10 children, and then whispers started happening as they did. And Raymond, the Count, got a little bit wondering, you know, what does she do on Saturdays? What does she do in a bath? Maybe she's got a lover. So what he did was he betrayed her and spied on her and saw her at a bath and saw that her skin rippled with scales, that she was not human. And he was absolutely taken aback. And then he called her one day after that. Like, he still loved her and he wanted to be with her, but he couldn't quite keep it secret until one day he said, "You serpent." And she knew that he'd spied on her. And she immediately turned into a dragon and flew off and out of the country. And Poitou lost its gifts, lost its power, lost its prosperity. And it said that Melusine keeps looking around to find her children, that she will fly, very Lilith fashion, because what started happening after those early stories is that she then became Christianized. She became monstrous. She became seductive and evil, and that she was the untrustworthy one. There was no betrayal of her. There was no sovereignty goddess building the land. She became something snaky, and we all know what the Christians thought of snakes and original sin and apples and women, and all of that story started coming on in and changing it. There was actually, through the 14, 15, 1600s, as part of the classification of which and who should be condemned to death or not, was if you had a fondness for animals. Imagine generations through Europe and maybe also through the States of, if you had an animal who you loved, you could be called up as a witch. I mean, imagine what that did for our relationship with creatures. I'm looking over at my beloved dog here. Imagine what that did for kindness and compassion and relationship. If you could be burned, hounded for having animal friends. So that also brought the veils down harder and brought in a break. And it brought in more of the monstrous woman idea, and woman's body as an agency of sin, of woman considered animal and less than, with these uncontrollable urges. So when we track back through these stories, through these hybrids, there's a power and an agency and an autonomy. And one of the things I love about fairy tales is that when you touch them, you don't just touch how they're written now. You touch all the tongues that have ever spoken to them. You touch all the way back 30,000 years. You touch all the way back to those dragons in the earth, and the snakes and the flying goddesses and the bird women. There was actually an old Assyrian goddess who was a mermaid, Atargatis, who was a moon goddess as well. We track the story of Melusine all the way back to her, and all the way back to the shining moon. We track it back to a dynamic relationship with wild, with earth, with animal, and to come into that type of nature within yourself. So animal bride stories, they disrupt normative narratives. They help open that door into our relationship with the other world. I don't know how they do this. It's kind of, it's archetypal, it's energetic, it's magic, but I've seen time and time again. I don't know if any of you have been caught by stories and feel the shift. That's why I teach these longer story programs, because it's on reflection with the stories that that animal wisdom, that nature wisdom starts coming through, starts rippling your pelt in different ways. Oh, have a breath, just have a stretch for the moment. That's a fair bit of talking there, and a whole lot of words that haven't been spoken in the background as well of this, and all of your own stories and knowing in resting in this circle. So if you have a stretch, and let's just change form and change shapes, I'd love to take you into a meditation, and then we'll have a bit of a chat and a check-in afterwards. So So just have a feeling of your body. Oh, if you breathe in and breathe out with a sigh on the exhale, and drop in and drop down. Oh yeah. Come into your heart, into your belly, into your tail, whatever kind of tail it might be, into your claws if you have them, into this earth that has given rise to you, hybrid being, animal being, human. And I'm just going to lead you into a quieter space, into the mythic realm, and you can either follow my words or not, or have your eyes open and closed. I invite you to feel your body and the earth underneath you and the heavens above you. And to breathe, feeling held and supported above and below, and coming into your heart, coming into the inner sanctum of your heart. You know, that space that's invitation only, the sanctuary of your being. And just rest in here in the core of you. And if you imagine in here, just resting in this deep heart space, imagine looking out the back door of your heart, looking out into the universe, because you are just as big inside as you are, as the world is outside. You have a universe within you, so feel the spaciousness in there. And imagine just stepping out from your inner sanctum between the worlds through time and space, through the stars, and crossing the threshold through the veil between this world and the mythic realm. Just let yourself land in the mythic realm, the realm of the other world. And it doesn't matter whether you see it or not, part of you will sense this. And I invite you to find a place where you can go inwards and sit. Maybe it's a cave, maybe it's a shelter. It's somewhere where it is quiet and dark if you wish. Place where you can sit and go in and down in this mythic realm. Place where you can listen in with your own heartbeat and the deep, slow heartbeat of the earth. And listen in with your body. Imagine taking off your human skin and wait and breathe and listen. Just listen, because something will arise. It always does. Maybe now, maybe later. Perhaps there's a heartbeat under your own. Perhaps there's a deeper heartbeat within you of something else, something other. And you can stay here if you wish to explore. Many discoveries are made in the quiet dark. Or if you choose to step out, then step out into the landscape of your animal nature. Step out into the land where your animal self lives. Just notice any way your body might shift or change. How do you walk? How does your pelt feel, whether it's feathers or scales or hair or fur or something entirely different? How does that move? Is there a tail? What happens to your feet, your mouth? What form lives within you? And let it explore you and you explore it. What else lies within you that would like to come through? What does it reveal? What would it have you know? What would it have you be? Thanking this one, and know that you can connect at any time, that it is only a breath away. You can connect with this animal essence within you. And thanking the mythic realm, thanking this space, and just moving back across the veil, moving back through time and space, coming back into the sanctum of your heart. And just notice, what does it feel like to have a sense of animal and human in your heart space? And just feel your body. Just come back a little more fully into your body, still with a sense of other. And if you wish, we have just a few minutes where you can write, if this one would like a voice, would like words, or would like drawing, and see what comes out your pen. What would it have you know? What would it say? And if you're a dancer, you might like to dance, move that. So in shape or in words. What story would it like to share? We're winding up. And there might be more story that unfolds as well over the next few days. So just be open to noticing what might arise in your animal body. And I'd love to just have a few more minutes as well of checking in with you. And is there anything that you would like to share, either what you noticed or felt, or anything that comes up as well with your sense of animal bride stories? Just pop your hand up or come off mute. I'm flicking between about um, four screens here. So just take yourself off mute and come on in if there's something that you'd like to mention, or any questions or ideas.
It feels like a deep invitation to return to, hey, Jackie, it's so good to be here, to return to a quintessential part of myself or ourselves that because of your great poignant way of communicating seems closer now. I think it seemed closer for most of my life, but now it seems far away. So I'm just kind of wondering into how to bridge it back to a replenishment, as Pluto moves into Aquarius, in this full moon these days. If I was to answer my own question, I would say it's got to be wings with a sense of humor that are mischievous and wild, and who knows how many other creatures are on this divine child.
Yes. Lovely to hear from you, Laurel.
Thank you.
Oh, take your one of the things that I love to do is take your questions to the characters in the story. Take your questions to the narrative and see what happens. Take it to an animal, whether it's one of the animals that you're noticing in your land around you. See what raven says to your question. Go out walking with them and notice what you notice. See what wolf in the story or the mermaid or the snake says to you. It's a way of gathering just another view. See how your heart responds to that message. And it might not be through words. I often find that when we're connecting in with fairy tales, when we're connecting in with, particularly with these other world beings or with critters, is that it might be through dreams, or it might be literally through the animal appearing to you, or what somebody else says, or the podcast that pops up. So be open to synchronicities and be open to noticing what you notice. And play with it. Yeah. Anyone else? Just having a look if there's any hands. Just take yourself off mute will probably be the fastest way. Yeah, Cam. Hey, good to see you.
You said what is lost in the age of rationalism. And I wonder if you could speak more about that. Like, I can think of mystery, and I'm trying to think about how that relates to our times when we are so into science for explanations, and yet we seem to be questioning science too. So I don't know. Can you say more about that?
Oh, isn't that a gorgeous conversation that we could all have over a very, very long cup of tea? Yes. I love how science is bridging with spirit these days. I love what is becoming possible with some of these fabulous scientists like Greg Braden, like Bruce Lipton, and some of those. There's questionings that's coming in that is allowing space for mystery. What happened, and I guess I'm also speaking retrospectively as well, because in these days, there's a greater consciousness of a longing and of an exploration and a breadth of spirituality, of communion that is coming in so many ways. And in the West, at least, you're not going to be burnt as a heretic. It's not compulsory to go to a Christian church like it used to be. You had to go to mass at least twice or three times a week. It was compulsory. If we're going back to the 1600s, any signs of behavior that was not normative in what was classed as normative at that time, then you would be hounded. But speaking to rationalism, when we had the age of so-called enlightenment and of rationalism, there was that impetus to name and label everything. It's when the veil came down even more strongly. If you weren't able to have a creature as a pet. So there was that rise through the industrial age, through the last century of we'll have greater control, we'll have greater ease. We have the myth of progress, which ties into the myth of control and ease and money and power. And we will have answers. If you think of the education system where you're taught to give answers. One of the things that, as well, that I don't feel that we're taught in this, I guess, let me just phrase it in the way that I long to phrase, as we emerge into the age of non-anthropocentrism, as we emerge into the age of greater kinship, there's, I believe there's more of an energetic or a vibrational sense that people have as well that's developing. But coming out of that, the education system and the healthcare, the dominant healthcare system of answers, of knowing, of one of the things that I really notice with, I do a lot of work that I called wild presence work, is how much we see in particular ways. We lose our peripheral vision. We lose our 360-degree vision. We lose that sense of what's behind us, and we'll look. Oops, sorry, I'll just need to do a mute thing here. There's a bit of a noise that's coming, echoing. So there's that loss of listening, loss of seeing, and a narrowing of focus, and an increase of individualism and more rigid structures of ego and self-identification with what I do rather than a greater experience of what I am. One of the things that I love, that I've learned a lot from Aboriginal art here in Australia, is that a self-portrait has no face. A self-portrait doesn't define someone like it, you couldn't tell this mirror image. A self-portrait is goanna and where the water hole is and where the tree is. Self-portrait is the land that surrounds you. You can tell who somebody is by what they are in relationship with. And that's one of the key things that I feel we've lost, is our greater experience of relationship. Oh, the things. Yes, that would be a great ongoing question. Yes, Raven's reminded you to be present and extra perceptive these last 2 days. Fantastic. Oh, and warned you so that you are safe on the road. Yes. I love that story. Anybody else have a story that you'd like to, or a question or an
Jackie,
idea
can you
like to mention? Yeah.
can you hear me, Jackie?
Yes, Emmy.
It's Emmy, hi. I haven't got my contacts in. I'm blind as about, and I'm struggling to look at all the little things I need to do across the bottom of my screen. So I'm just going to speak.
You're good.
I hope I'm not butting in. I hope I'm not jumping the queue. Hello. Hello everybody. I'm here in my father's, well, like a man who was like a father to me, in his house in 2 hours drive north of Sydney in the Lower Hunter Valley, packing up his things. And there's someone coming in to live here tomorrow. And so the veil is feeling very, very thin. And I've moved all the furniture out, and I'm sitting on a bed in a space that I have a deep attachment to, and I will return to. But I'm really curious in terms of the presence of animals and in terms of signs. I keep getting there's a movement over in this room across the hallway over there, and it keeps distracting me. It's really powerful. I'm really feeling like Dave's here. He has many totemic animals that are associated with this space. So one is the magpie, and there's a magpie which lives out in the tree outside. And there's a little baby magpie who's been coming to visit as I've been doing things. And she's been following me down the hallway into the house and checking out what I'm up to and asking for some food. And she's obviously been adopted by the local neighborhood. So there's Renee, the baby magpie. There's also this strange experience I had recently of arriving, and the house had been closed up, and it gets very hot here. It's 43 degrees here today. And a bird had come into the house and had become trapped and couldn't escape. Couldn't find that space at the top of the window where it had come in. And so I came and found all the presence of this bird who'd been really ultimately entombed in this house and had crashed and tried all the windows. And then ultimately,
speak really clearly to, just because we've only got a couple of moments left, another bit of an essence of that.
It lay ultimately for air in the bathroom. and lay on the tiles and died. So when I arrived, I found this dead bird that I've yet to identify. Actually, I've been so busy, but I've got its wings and I've buried it with ceremony in the backyard. I'm just really curious. I've had this experience before where there'll be a bird, say a 20 frogmouth, where I live in Sydney. What were your take, or other people who are present, is on what the significance, or how you sort of would feel into that? I've got my own experience of it, I suppose, but I've also found it quite unsettling.
Yes, I can imagine that you would. Actually, what I'm going to do, just because we've got a really, really brief time here, I'd love to let that question rest in the field for you all to explore with, well, what is a sign? What is a symbol? How do you relate to when you are really touched by something? How do you actually reflect on what is really touching you? One of the things that these tales do is bring us into relationship with opposites. It's a bird that's died. It was a life force that's there. It's touched me. It's ringing through my being. How do I make sense of this? And one of the things that the tales do is enable us to do that without making it small, without saying, oh, this means that, but it means this and that. What the tales do is give us the gift of and, that it's this and this and this. And so I invite you to play with ands, and that it can be both a message, an upliftment, a death, a rebirth, a reminder of your beloved friend, an opening in your psyche. It could be resurrection energies. There's so much that it could mean, and sit with what rings true in your being. There's so much that's possible. Oh, just if you have a breath and have a stretch again, just to change time. What we need to do is wind up here. But what I'd like, for those of you who'd like to stay on, I'd like to have a brief chat about if you'd like to go deeper in connecting with animals and forests and the wise woman of the land with the Kaliak. I'm going to chat for about 5 minutes about Wolf Song, tracing the shadow dance of the wild, which is a 6-week story program starting on February the 5th. What we have got for those of you who sign up for watching the video, this masterclass, is you can get 3 extra bonuses of some courses that I've run and other classes. And if Leah, you're still there, there's a link for that. Otherwise, we'll send it out to you.
And to clarify, Jacqueline, I believe that was when people register for your classes, they get those just so they get those extra bonus classes.
Yes, thank you for that.
Yes.
When you register for it, there's early bird at the moment, so you save $50 off it all. So basically, what Wolf Song is about, it's allowing us to trace 2 stories: the story of La Loba, the desert woman who finds bones, old bones, and sings them to new life. And it's also the story of Red Riding Hood, but not how you know it. It's actually a sort of a much more shamanic, animistic Red Riding Hood. It's an initiation story of going into the forest and meeting the wise one and walking with Wolf. And basically it's about how do we engage with these energies, these dynamics in our life, for wisdom, for personal healing, for medicine, to allow them to be guides, healers, ways of bridging into the other world. And it's a way, the story process is about tapping into your animal instincts, tapping into a wilder wisdom. What is it that's living within you that would like to be expressed somehow? How to step beyond that within you that might be compliant or feeling too tamed, that wants to stretch its boundaries at the moment. And I like to make these classes incredibly experiential. So there's meditations and a profusion of creative prompts and meditation journeys and conversations and movement and drawing and a whole range of creative possibilities. So basically, it's about connecting in with the wise woman and the wolf, and also with the other world as well. So is there, and letting yourself be worked by their stories as well. I often say at the beginning, it's about reflecting on the stories. Oh, thanks. That was Tracy who did Wolf Song. Thanks for that. It's absolutely magical. I loved finding powerful revisioning of Wolf and Grandma and Red, bringing them into my life in ways that opened me up to different vistas here in my 50s, and that my space and gentle guidance was brilliant. Thanks, Tracy, leading to deep insights.
What I can share, Jacqueline,
Yes.
is that I get, you know, as founder of the School for Sacred Storytelling, I get to do two things. I get to, one, deeply listen for what's needed in our times. What are the kinds of stories that need to be carried? And then I get to attune to those magical creatures who will help bring those stories to life. And Jacqueline is one of those people. I am so honored that she's part of the School for Sacred Storytelling because of the depth and breadth and study and dedication. I don't think we have any other teacher in the school, and we've got a lot of amazing teachers, but nobody is dedicated to their students in the way that Jacqueline is. It's just profound to see her commitment, not only to the experience of being a storyteller, not only the experience of living with the land, closely with it, as a spiritual herbalist, which I love that phrase, but also what is it to hold space, a sanctuary where the people, you know, as ourselves can come into this space and experience that kind of sanctity, that kind of place where we can deeply listen to the voice of the soul. And what I understand through being with Jacqueline's work is that she gives us access to these old ancient stories that have so much wisdom woven into the crevices between the letters, between the words, and then gifts you the time and space to open to your own knowledge and wise woman within you and wise man within you to listen to what those stories want to tell you in these times. And I think it's a profound moment when we're coming. You said something, Jacqueline, that really landed in me, which is that when you listen to these old stories, they change what's normative. In some ways, they give us the truth of our wholeness, of what it is to be interspecies relations, you know, to have these interspecies relationships. And it's like they give them to us back. And they give us a new paradigm and a new way to unlearn so much of the damaging, disconnecting work that's kind of brought us to this moment. And it gives us a way to directly begin to heal through play, through pleasure, through delight, through communion and community. I told you there were two things that I get to experience, and one is that deep listening and choosing teachers, and the other one is I get to see what everyone has to say on the other side of the class, which is why I interrupted when Tracy popped in. And people, I have never seen so many beautiful testimonials of what people walk out with. And as you know, it's like we're not teaching you the 6 bullet points for how to sell your business through story. So it's you know, in terms of being definitive, it's a more gift of our capacity to meet the challenge of the moment, to make the untangible, the unspeakable, the mysteries, the wisdom ways that are living and hiding in the world of sacred storytelling. Right. But this is so quintessential. Thank you for giving me those words. You know, and this to me are the tools for transformation, for how to live in these times. And that's why I am personally committed to holding a space for sacred storytelling to continue to live among us, because there's not very many places. So you are in such beautiful hands with Jacqueline. It is such a gift to be in the wild ways with this wild, wonderful woman. And this class is just pure magic, pure medicine, you know, healing for the soul. And so, yes, and when you register the next 24 hours, you get these 3 extra videos, which is like, you know, you don't even have to wait for class to start. You get to just jump right in and start receiving that medicine. And, you know, the one thing I'll also know about the magic of this is that as soon as you say yes, the stories start coming alive in you. And there's no way that you can be close to one of these old stories and for them not to come start living themselves through you. I don't have the link on me. Jacqueline, I don't know if you have that link, but somebody's asking for the course, the link to be
Yes,
placed in the chat.
the
We'll get that to you.
I haven't yet sent it to you. I didn't receive it from Melissa.
But the link for your course. It's
For
the name.
the link for the course I've got,
Yes,
but
yes.
the link for the extra stuff.
No.
for-
That's what they get when they register.
Right.
But
Oh,
this is
okay.
for
This is for everybody.
how to register for the class is what they're looking
Yes,
for.
there it is.
Yeah.
Just pop that up again.
And I'll leave you with this one last thought, which I just want to.
Uh-huh.
It's a warning and a welcome invitation that when you start being around magical stories, you start inviting in a magical life. And I remember one of our elder teachers coming and talking about how he would look for the signs of animals, and they would guide him, if they were flying towards him or away from him, would direct him on what he was thinking. This morning I was thinking of you because I saw a red-tailed hawk right beside my car, coming right towards me, telling me exactly what to go towards. And I know that this comes alive even more because I'm in I'm in the shadow of your stories and of this course and what's happening here. So thank you for bringing this so alive into our world. And I'll stop talking now. You guys can ask questions as you will.
Thank you, Leah. Actually, just I'll mention briefly as well, one of the things that I love is how dynamic they are. That these stories, it's not just us doing the therapy and doing the work. You can just come along to the class and listen, and stuff starts moving because you are held in a field that is alive and dynamic, and things just start shifting and changing automatically. I have a huge creativity book because I'm really into abundance and get a million ideas of what could be great. And you don't need to do any of it. Things just change. One of the things I often hear from folks is that it's not always conscious, that it's not through words, but they'll say, I'm just no longer doing this. Or I stood up and I said this today for the first time, and I've been wanting to say that for decades. I'm setting clearer boundaries. I've changed and I'm no longer doing this, working in this way. I'm perceiving in a new way. It's like there's an integration that happens automatically that changes. It's yeah, Tracy, it is a huge resource book. I just get very, very enthusiastic. Are there any questions that you have? Or if any questions or ideas or anything comes up for you as well, please do contact me. I don't know if I'm okay to give my email here, but if anything comes up, just JackieBushletMe.com. Do send me a line if there's questions, ideas, or anything that arises.
And I would just add, for logistical questions about the course and registration, that wants to go to info@leahland.com.
Info. Thank you, Leah. Thank you for what you have made available here. Any other thoughts, questions before we wind up? Now it's time for us to have a cup of tea and go into the kitchen together and chat. It's always a bit tricky over the line. Yeah, gorgeous to see you all. So if you feel into yourself, and let's wind up, I can't see any other hands, and just feel your animal body, your pelt, feel that long line of stories and where you might rest in them. If your story was an animal union story, what might it be? What might be playing out? Have you been enchanted into a particular form? Is there something that lives within you, like one of these sovereignty deities? Do you put on a pelt and step into something in your life, in your actions, and then can take it off? Is it like a role that you have? Flying seahorse, yes. If you were to give your creature a name, what might it be? So I invite you to play with it over the next little while. And it's been such a delight being here with you all. I really, really hope to see you again very soon. Wishing you all blessings of this beautiful, bright full moon. Everybody.